Sarah Thompson had always known she was different from her neighbors. When she moved into the old farmhouse on Maple Lane, she didn't expect a warm welcome, but she certainly didn't anticipate the hostility that followed. The house wasn't fancy. It hadn't been updated in decades, but it held memories that no amount of money could replace. It was where her grandmother taught her how to bake pies, where her father fixed broken fences under the scorching sun, and where laughter echoed through its creaky wooden floors during family gatherings. For Sarah, it wasn't just a house, it was home. But to the rest of the neighborhood, it was an eyesore. The suburban development surrounding her property gleamed with freshly painted shutters, manicured lawns, and shiny new cars parked in driveways. Every house looked like it belonged in a glossy magazine spread, except for hers. Her farm stood out like a stubborn weed in a perfectly trimmed garden. The paint on the barn was peeling, the windmill groaned in the wind, and wildflowers grew untamed along the edges of the fields. To the Homeowners Association, HOA, this was unacceptable. The HOA ruled the neighborhood with an iron fist. They enforced strict rules about everything: how high grass could grow, what color houses should be painted, even the type of curtains visible from the street. From the moment Sarah arrived, they made it clear she didn't fit their vision of perfection. Letters began appearing in her mailbox almost immediately. Your property is not compliant. Read one. Please address the overgrown vegetation. Another warned, failure to meet aesthetic standards may result in fines. At first, Sarah ignored them. She figured if she stayed quiet, they'd leave her alone. But the letters kept coming, each more aggressive than the last. Then came the knocks on her door. A representative from the HOA showed up unannounced one Saturday morning, while Sarah was tending to her vegetable patch. Dressed in a crisp suit, the man introduced himself as Mr. Harper, the HOA president. He spoke politely at first, complimenting her flowers before launching into a lecture about community pride. We want everyone to feel proud of where they live, he said, gesturing toward the surrounding homes. Unfortunately, your setup doesn't align with our guidelines. Sarah crossed her arms and smiled sweetly. This setup has been here longer than most of these houses, she replied. It's part of the land's history. Mr. Harper frowned, clearly unimpressed. History or not, we have standards to uphold, he said firmly. If you don't take action soon, there will be consequences. As weeks turned into months, the pressure mounted. Neighbors whispered behind her back, calling her difficult and unreasonable. Some openly complained, claiming her unkempt land lowered property values. Children stopped playing near her fence, and invitations to block parties mysteriously stopped arriving. Sarah felt isolated, but deep down, she knew she couldn't give in. This farm wasn't just her home, it was her heritage, and she wasn't about to let anyone erase it. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sarah sat on her porch, staring at the golden fields stretching out before her. Despite the chaos, she found peace here. The rustling leaves, the chirping crickets, and the faint scent of earth reminded her why she fought so hard. Maybe the HOA hated her farm now, but someday they'd see its true value, or she'd make sure of it. The tension between Sarah and the HOA only grew thicker with time. What started as polite warnings quickly escalated into outright hostility. The letters became more frequent, piling up on her kitchen counter like a mountain of frustration. Each one carried the same message: comply or face consequences. But compliance wasn't an option for Sarah. Every demand from the HOA felt like an attack on her family's legacy. They wanted her to cut down the ancient oak tree that shaded half her yard because it didn't match the uniformity of the neighborhood. They insisted she pave over part of her field to create a driveway wide enough for 2 cars, even though she only owned one. And they demanded she replace the weathered wooden fence with something modern and sleek. Sarah tried reasoning with them at first. She attended HOA meetings, hoping to explain why her farm mattered, not just to her, but to the community. She brought photos of the farmhouse when it was newly built over a century ago, showing how it had stood tall through wars, economic depressions, and natural disasters. She talked about the history embedded in every beam and brick, stories that couldn't be replicated by cookie-cutter houses. But no one listened. Instead, her pleas were met with blank stares or dismissive comments like, "Times change, Sarah. Maybe it's time you did too." Frustrated and feeling cornered, Sarah began avoiding the meetings altogether. That's when things got worse. The fines started rolling in, small amounts at first, then larger ones that added up faster than she could keep track. One day, she opened her mailbox to find a notice threatening legal action if she didn't pay within 30 days. It was overwhelming, not just financially, but emotionally. How could they put a price tag on something so deeply personal? Her neighbors weren't much help either. At first, some had been sympathetic, nodding politely when she waved hello. But as the conflict dragged on, their attitudes shifted. Conversations turned cold, smiles faded, and doors closed before she could even knock. A few openly sided with the HOA, complaining loudly about her refusal to conform. One neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, marched onto Sarah's property one afternoon, pointing accusingly at the wildflowers growing along the edge of her field. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "It looks like a jungle out here. You're ruining the neighborhood." Even worse, rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed Sarah was hoarding junk inside the barn. Others whispered that she was using the land for illegal activities. None of it was true, but the gossip stung all the same. Sarah found herself withdrawing, spending less time outside and more time tending to her garden alone. Yet, despite the isolation, she refused to back down. Deep down, she believed she was fighting for something bigger than herself. One evening, after another long day of dodging judgmental glances and ignoring angry phone calls, Sarah sat down at her kitchen table with a cup of tea. As she stared at the stack of HOA letters, an idea sparked in her mind. If they thought her farm was worthless, maybe it was time to show them otherwise. She pulled out her laptop and started researching historic preservation laws. Hours passed as she scrolled through websites, reading about landmarks, protected sites, and federal regulations. By the time she went to bed, her head was buzzing with possibilities. The next morning, Sarah visited the local library, determined to dig deeper. She spent hours sifting through old records, flipping through yellowed pages filled with handwritten notes and faded photographs. Slowly, a picture emerged, one that proved her farm wasn't just a relic of the past. It was a piece of living history. With each discovery, her resolve hardened. The HOA might have money and influence, but Sarah had something far more powerful, proof that her farm deserved to be saved. If they wouldn't listen to her words, she'd make them see the truth another way. Sarah's journey into the world of historic preservation began with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. She had heard about the National Register of Historic Places, a government program designed to protect buildings, structures, and sites of cultural or historical significance. If her farm qualified, it could gain federal protection, shielding it from the HOA's relentless demands. But getting listed wasn't easy. It required mountains of paperwork, detailed documentation, and evidence that her property was truly unique. For someone who'd never tackled anything like this before, the task felt daunting. Still, Sarah knew she had no choice but to try. Her first step was gathering proof of the farm's age and importance. She started by combing through old family records stored in dusty boxes in her attic. There were faded letters, brittle newspaper clippings, and sepia-toned photographs of her ancestors standing proudly beside the barn. One photo showed her great-great-grandfather, a wiry man with a scruffy beard, leaning against the windmill he built himself during the Civil War era. Another depicted rows of crops stretching across the fields, feeding families when food was scarce. Each item told a story, connecting Sarah to a time long gone but still alive in these artifacts. Next, she reached out to local historians and preservationists for guidance. At first, they were skeptical. "The process is complicated," one warned her, "and there's no guarantee you'll succeed." But Sarah didn't let their caution discourage her. Instead, she poured her heart into learning everything, she could about the application process. She attended workshops, joined online forums, and read countless articles late into the night. Slowly, she pieced together what she needed: a compelling narrative that highlighted the farm's role in shaping the community's history. Photography became her next challenge. The application required detailed images of every aspect of the property: the farmhouse, the barn, the windmill, even the overgrown fields the HOA despised so much. Armed with her phone and a borrowed tripod, Sarah spent weekends capturing every angle. She climbed ladders to get shots of the roof tiles, knelt in the dirt to frame the wildflowers, and waited patiently for golden hour light to bathe the old oak tree in warmth. Though her hands were blistered and her knees sore, she couldn't help but smile as she worked. Every snapshot reminded her why this fight mattered. As weeks turned into months, Sarah faced setbacks that tested her resolve. Some neighbors mocked her efforts openly, calling them futile and wasteful. "You're wasting your time," one sneered while walking his dog past her fence. Others spread rumors that she was trying to swindle money from the government. Even the HOA chimed in, sending yet another letter accusing her of stalling and demanding immediate action. Each insult stung, but Sarah refused to let negativity derail her. She reminded herself daily of the stories tied to her land, the laughter, struggles, and triumphs of generations who had come before her. To fund her project, Sarah organized small fundraisers, selling homemade jams and baked goods at a roadside stand near her driveway. Locals curious about her battle stopped by, buying jars of strawberry preserves or slices of apple pie. Many left with more than just treats. They walked away inspired by Sarah's determination. Some even offered to help, volunteering their time to assist with photography or research. Their support reignited her spirit, reminding her she wasn't entirely alone. By the time Sarah submitted her application, she had transformed not only her understanding of history, but also her sense of purpose. This wasn't just about saving a building. It was about honoring the people who had lived and worked on this land. As she mailed off the thick envelope containing years' worth of effort, she felt a surge of hope and fear. What if they said no? What if all her hard work amounted to nothing? But deep down, Sarah believed in the power of truth. Her farm wasn't just an old structure. It was a living testament to resilience, survival, and love. Whether the committee agreed or not, she had already proven something important. Sometimes, standing up for what you believe in is worth every ounce of struggle. And if luck was on her side, the world would soon see her farm for what it truly was: a piece of history worth protecting. The waiting was the hardest part. After submitting her application to the National Register of Historic Places, Sarah felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. She had done everything she could: gathered documents, taken hundreds of photos, written essays detailing the farm's history. But now, all she could do was wait. Days stretched into weeks, and each morning brought a fresh wave of doubt. What if they rejected her? What if all her hard work wasn't enough? Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, an official-looking envelope arrived in her mailbox. Her heart raced as she tore it open, her hands trembling so much she almost dropped the letter inside. The first line hit her like a bolt of lightning. "We are pleased to inform you that your property has been approved for listing on the National Register of Historic Places." For a moment, Sarah couldn't breathe. Tears welled up in her eyes as she read the rest of the letter, which explained that her farm was now officially recognized as a site of national significance. It was protected under federal law, meaning no HOA or anyone else could force her to alter or demolish it without facing serious legal consequences. Overwhelmed with emotion, Sarah ran outside, clutching the letter to her chest. She stood in the middle of her field, looking at the farmhouse and barn bathed in golden sunlight. This place had been through so much: wars, droughts, storms, and now, finally, its value was undeniable. She laughed, cried, and whispered a quiet thank you to the ancestors who had built this home and kept it alive through generations. Word spread quickly. Reporters caught wind of Sarah's victory and descended on the farm, eager to tell the story of the woman who took on the HOA and won. Cameras flashed as journalists snapped pictures of the weathered barn, the rusted windmill, and Sarah herself, standing tall amidst the fields. When asked how she felt about the win, Sarah smiled and said simply, "This farm isn't just my home. It's a piece of history. I'm glad others can see that now." Her neighbors, once so quick to criticize, suddenly grew quiet. Some seemed genuinely shocked by the news, while others tried to brush it off as unimportant. But there was no denying the impact of Sarah's achievement. The HOA, meanwhile, scrambled to distance itself from the controversy. Their harsh treatment of Sarah had made them look petty and out of touch, and public opinion turned sharply against them. Social media lit up with posts praising Sarah's perseverance and condemning the HOA's tactics. Local newspapers ran editorials questioning why such organizations were allowed to wield so much power over people's lives. For Sarah, the recognition went beyond personal vindication. It validated her belief that progress didn't have to come at the expense of history. Her farm became a symbol of resilience, proving that beauty and value weren't always found in shiny new things. Visitors started showing up on weekends, curious to see the landmark everyone was talking about. Families brought their kids to walk among the wildflowers, couples posed for photos by the old windmill, and retirees lingered near the porch, sharing stories about farms they'd grown up on. Even some former critics softened their stance, admitting that the farm added character to the neighborhood in ways they hadn't appreciated before. With her newfound fame, Sarah seized the opportunity to educate others about historic preservation. She hosted small tours, inviting guests to explore the property while explaining its rich past. She showed them the original beams holding up the farmhouse roof, pointed out bullet holes left behind from wartime skirmishes, and shared tales of her grandmother making soap in the kitchen. Each visitor left with a deeper appreciation for the land, and for Sarah's determination to protect it. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came when Mr. Harper, the HOA president, showed up at her door. Gone was his usual air of superiority. Instead, he looked awkward and uneasy. He mumbled something about misunderstandings and extended a hesitant congratulations. Sarah listened politely, then thanked him with a knowing smile. She didn't gloat or rub it in. She didn't need to. His presence alone was proof that she had won. As the sun set that evening, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Sarah sat on her porch, watching the field sway gently in the breeze. The battle wasn't over yet. The HOA still existed, and tensions remained, but she had struck a monumental blow. For the first time in years, she felt truly at peace. Her farm wasn't just saved, it was celebrated. And Sarah knew, deep down, that she had set something bigger in motion, a movement to honor the past while building a better future. With the farm officially recognized as a National Historic Landmark, Sarah turned her attention to restoring it to its former glory. The years of neglect had taken their toll. Paint peeled off the barn walls, the farmhouse roof sagged in places, and weeds threatened to overtake the once thriving vegetable garden. But now, with newfound support pouring in from all directions, Sarah saw an opportunity not just to fix what was broken, but to breathe new life into the land she loved so dearly. The first step was raising funds. Inspired by her earlier success selling homemade jams and pies, Sarah launched a crowdfunding campaign online. She shared photos of the farm's history, wrote heartfelt posts about her journey, and explained how every dollar would go toward preserving this piece of heritage. To her surprise, donations began rolling in almost immediately, not just from locals, but from people across the country who had followed her story. Some gave $5, others gave hundreds. A retired teacher from Ohio sent a handwritten note along with her contribution. "Your courage reminds me of my grandparents' farm. Thank you for standing up for history." But money wasn't the only thing people offered. Volunteers started showing up on weekends, eager to help however they could. High school students painted fences, retirees fixed creaky floorboards, and skilled carpenters repaired the windmill that had stood silent for decades. One Saturday morning, Sarah looked out at the bustling scene before her. Kids planting heirloom seeds in the garden, families scrubbing dirt off old tools in the barn, and even a group of musicians playing folk songs near the oak tree. It felt like a festival, a celebration of community spirit and shared purpose. As the restoration progressed, Sarah made sure to honor the farm's original character. Instead of replacing the weathered wooden beams in the barn, she sanded them down and sealed them to preserve their rustic charm. The farmhouse got a fresh coat of white paint, just like it had worn in old photographs, and wildflowers were replanted along the edges of the fields, creating a natural border that attracted bees and butterflies. Every decision was guided by respect for the past, ensuring the farm remained true to its roots while adapting to modern needs. Word of the transformation spread quickly, drawing visitors from far and wide. Tourists came to marvel at the landmark, snapping photos of the restored windmill and wandering through the gardens where heirloom tomatoes and corn grew tall. Local schools organized field trips, giving children a chance to learn about farming techniques used centuries ago. Teachers praised Sarah for offering such a hands-on educational experience, saying it helped students connect with history in ways textbooks never could. Even former critics softened their stance. Mrs. Peterson, who had once marched onto Sarah's property demanding change, showed up one day holding a tray of brownies. "I wanted to apologize," she said sheepishly. "You were right about this place. It's beautiful." Sarah accepted the gesture graciously, inviting her to join a volunteer session later that week. By the end of the afternoon, Mrs. Peterson was laughing alongside everyone else, her hands covered in soil as she planted sunflower seeds. As the seasons changed, so did the farm. Spring brought blossoms, summer filled the air with the scent of ripe fruit, fall painted the trees in fiery colors, and winter wrapped everything in serene stillness. Through it all, Sarah remained at the heart of it, guiding the work with patience and care. What had once been dismissed as an eyesore was now a vibrant hub of activity, a testament to resilience, teamwork, and the enduring power of history. One evening, as Sarah sat on the porch watching the sunset, she reflected on how far they'd come. The farm wasn't just saved, it was thriving. And though challenges lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain. Together, they had created something extraordinary. The HOA might have tried to erase this place, but instead, it had become stronger than ever. A living reminder that some things are worth fighting for. With the farm now thriving and recognized as a national historic landmark, Sarah felt it was time to address the root of the problem, the HOA that had made her life miserable for so long. She knew she couldn't let them off the hook after everything they'd done. Their bullying tactics, unreasonable fines, and attempts to erase her family's legacy weren't just directed at her. Many other homeowners in the neighborhood had suffered silently under their iron grip. It was time to take them down. Sarah began by gathering evidence, something she had been quietly doing throughout her battle with the HOA. She collected copies of every letter they had sent her, documenting their escalating threats and demands. She reached out to neighbors, asking if they'd experienced similar treatment. To her surprise, several admitted they had exorbitant fees for minor infractions, like mismatched curtains or slightly overgrown grass, unfair penalties for late payments, and even accusations of rule violations based on anonymous complaints. One elderly couple shared how the HOA fined them repeatedly because their mailbox was too close to the street, despite being installed according to regulations years ago. Armed with these stories, Sarah dug deeper into the HOA's operations. She filed public records requests, uncovering financial documents that revealed shocking mismanagement. Funds meant for community improvements were funneled into executive bonuses and lavish events for board members. Maintenance budgets sat untouched while residents struggled with potholed roads and broken streetlights. The more Sarah uncovered, the angrier she became, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been taken advantage of. She decided to file a class action lawsuit against the HOA, accusing them of discrimination, harassment, and misuse of funds. Her goal wasn't just to hold them accountable, but to dismantle the organization entirely. Word of the lawsuit spread quickly, igniting outrage among residents who had long resented the HOA's authoritarian ways. Dozens joined Sarah's cause, sharing their own grievances and adding fuel to the fire. Even some former critics rallied behind her, realizing the HOA's power had gone unchecked for too long. The media picked up the story, turning it into a national conversation about homeowners' rights and the ethics of HOAs. Journalists interviewed Sarah, highlighting her journey from a lone fighter to a leader of change. They also spoke with legal experts who explained how common it was for HOAs to abuse their authority. The coverage put immense pressure on the HOA, forcing them into damage control mode. Board members scrambled to defend themselves, issuing vague statements about misunderstandings and promising reforms. But no one believed them anymore. As the case moved through the courts, Sarah faced new challenges. The HOA hired expensive lawyers, hoping to intimidate her into dropping the suit. Neighbors whispered fears of retaliation, worried the HOA would target them next. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was she strong enough to see this through? But then she remembered all the people counting on her. The elderly couple fighting back tears as they recounted their struggles, the young family afraid of losing their home over unpaid fines, the countless others who saw her as a beacon of hope. She couldn't give up now. Finally, after months of legal battles, the court ruled in Sarah's favor. The judge declared the HOA guilty of systemic misconduct and ordered its dissolution. Its remaining assets were redistributed to affected residents as compensation. Cheers erupted in the courtroom when the verdict was announced, and Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. Justice had been served, not just for her, but for an entire community. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood began to heal. Freed from the HOA's oppressive rules, residents embraced newfound freedom. Gardens flourished in creative designs, mailboxes sported cheerful colors, and kids played freely without fear of arbitrary fines. The atmosphere shifted from tension to camaraderie, with neighbors organizing block parties and working together to maintain shared spaces. For Sarah, the victory was bittersweet. While she celebrated the downfall of the HOA, she mourned the years lost to stress and conflict. Still, she knew something important had been achieved. By standing up to injustice, she had sparked meaningful change, not just for herself, but for everyone around her. And as she looked out at the vibrant, united community growing stronger each day, she realized the fight had been worth every ounce of effort. Years after the dust had settled, Sarah's farm stood as a testament to resilience and transformation. The once neglected property was now a thriving landmark, drawing visitors from all over the country. What had started as a personal battle against the HOA had grown into something much larger, a movement to honor history, protect individual rights, and foster community spirit. For Sarah, it wasn't just about saving her home anymore. It was about leaving a legacy that would inspire others for generations to come. The farm became more than just a historic site. It evolved into a hub of education and connection. Every spring, Sarah hosted Heritage Days, inviting schools, historians, and families to explore the land and learn about its storied past. Children ran through the fields, marveling at the wildflowers and listening intently as Sarah recounted tales of her ancestors' struggles and triumphs. Parents snapped photos by the restored windmill, while grandparents reminisced about their own childhoods spent on similar farms. It was a place where stories came alive, bridging the gap between past and present. Sarah also took pride in mentoring others who found themselves in similar battles with HOAs or other oppressive systems. She traveled to nearby towns to speak at community meetings, sharing her story and offering advice on how to stand up for what mattered most. Her message was simple but powerful. You don't have to face injustice alone. Find your voice, gather support, and never stop fighting for what you believe in. Many credited her guidance with helping them reclaim control over their lives and properties. The neighborhood itself underwent a remarkable transformation. Without the HOA dictating every detail of residents' lives, creativity flourished. Houses were painted in bold colors, gardens overflowed with unique plants, and driveways sported quirky decorations like hand-painted rocks and homemade signs. Neighbors who had once avoided each other now shared meals, tools, and laughter. Block parties became regular occurrences, filled with music, food, and games that brought everyone together. The sense of unity was palpable, a stark contrast to the tension that had defined the area before. For Sarah, one of the most rewarding aspects of this journey was seeing how perceptions had shifted. Former critics who had once dismissed her efforts now openly admired her determination. Some even admitted they had underestimated her and the farm's value. One neighbor, Mr. Harper, the former HOA president, approached her at a community event with an awkward smile. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "You were right about this place all along." Sarah accepted his words graciously, knowing forgiveness was part of healing. As time went on, Sarah reflected on everything she had endured. The sleepless nights, the harsh criticism, the moments when giving up seemed easier than pushing forward. But looking around at the vibrant community she had helped create, she knew it had all been worth it. The scars of her battle remained, but so did the lessons she had learned. That standing your ground can spark change, that history deserves preservation, and that people are stronger when they unite for a common cause. On quiet evenings, Sarah often sat on her porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon as golden light bathed the fields. The rustling leaves, chirping crickets, and distant laughter of children playing reminded her why she had fought so hard. This land wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who cared about preserving pieces of the past while building a better future. Her story became a symbol of hope, featured in books, documentaries, and articles about grassroots activism and historic preservation. People called her brave, inspiring, and unstoppable, but Sarah didn't see herself that way. To her, she was simply someone who refused to let go of what mattered most. And perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes, the simplest acts of defiance can lead to extraordinary outcomes. Though the years ahead would bring new challenges, Sarah faced them with confidence, knowing she had already overcome the impossible. Her farm, her home, was safe, cherished, and alive with purpose. And as long as it stood, it would continue to remind the world that even in the face of adversity, courage and determination could turn loss into victory.